First things first. Here are the patterns that I'm going to be using for my demo. This one here. And this is a dress that I'm probably never going to make. So I just thought it would be good bodice to use for the demo. And also, if you notice on this bodice demo, there is no dart. So I'm going to address that as well. There is no dart. Here's the next one that I'm going to address. This is a wrap style dress from New Look. And you know a wrap is a wrap is a wrap. So I'll also tell you guys how to do a wrap. When you're able to adjust a wrap, if you can kind of get a look at that wrap top, you should be able to do a full bust adjustment on a one-arm dress, a bandeau, because all you're doing is imagining there's a full top there. So as we go through the steps, or as I go through the steps, I'll point that out as well. All right. Now, how do you determine if you need a full bust adjustment? Point blank, number one. If you look at your finished garment measurements on the back of your pattern, if they're not on the back of the pattern envelope, of course they are usually on the pattern paper. Sometimes on a loose fitting garment, you won't see them on the paper, but on a loose fitting garment, you really don't need an FBA because that particular garment is going to have a whole bunch of ease and your boobs are going to be able to fit inside. All right, so here's the pretty much the basic rule of thumb for, I guess this headset would probably be good if I plugged it up. All right, sorry about that. All right, you guys can hear me better? Now I don't have to yell. All right, here's the basic rule of thumb of FBA. With patterns, if you find a pattern and you're getting it to fit your bust, and usually if you get it to fit your bust, like say for instance your bust is a 44. A 44 is a 20. But if you're a smaller frame, your neck, your armholes, in this area up here, which is the top part of your body, the garment's going to be big. The neck's going to hang off, it's going to gap, and it's just not going to look nice. So what you're told to do is measure your upper bust, which is where my hands are. Measure your upper bust, and then according to your upper bust, that's what you look for on your pattern. So if let's do my dummy lady. Here's my my demonstrate chick here. All right, so we're going to measure her upper bust. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the comments off so I can actually see what I'm doing. And then I'll turn the comments back on and address any questions. All right. Hey, Marcy. Okay. If I can turn the quiet mode on. There it goes. Okay, now I have the comments off. All right, now, so what you would do is take an upper bust measurement. Upper bust means up above the bust. Okay, that's layman term number one. Upper bust is up above the bust. So we're measuring up above the bust. So on this particular lady, her upper bust is 41 and a half. So 41 and a half on my finished garment measurements, or actually on the bust, 41 and a half falls between, now for my upper bust measurement, I'm using the body chart. And the reason why I'm using the body chart is because I'm measuring the body. Okay, I'm not worried about the finished garment measurements right now. Like I said before, scratch that. Not worried about the finished garment measurements right now. I'm just checking my upper bust here. My upper bust, I'm checking my upper body with the body. Body measurements are the measurements that are usually on the flap, and it says body measurements. So on this one, her upper bust was 41 and a half. So on here, the bust says 40 for the 18 42 for the 20. She was, what did I say? Goodness, I forgot already. I think 42 and a half. I'm going to do that one more time. Her upper bust is, no, 41 and a half. So she falls in between 41 and a half. She falls in between the size 18 and the size 20. Okay. So we're going to go, since we're not fitting the bust, we're going to go with the size 18. Okay. Now, for the finished garment measurements on this particular one, the 18 bust, not the upper bust, we're not doing that no more. The finished garment measurements on this one is 43. All right, so according to this pattern, if we do an 18, she needs a 43. So we're going to choose the 43. This one, the bust is 42, which the 43 is an extra inch of ease. So we're going to just act like we need a ½ FBA. According to this one, if we would have did the 43, 18, this one would have fit with just the right amount of ease. Just so happens that this one fits. But when you measure your upper bust and you get that measurement and you find the finished garment measurement, which is actually 40, hers was 41 and a half. For this one, oh, okay, yeah. Finished garment measurements on this one is actually 41, which is smaller than her upper bust. So if we go to the 18 to 43. So this particular pattern happens to fit her. If I cut the 18, it's going to fit around the neck. It's going to fit around the armholes. And I'll have an inch of ease across the bust. So let's just say I picked a bad pattern to use. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to act like this particular pattern does not fit her. And we need an inch of room here. So that means when we get the upper bust measurement, after we took it, and this one was 41 and a half, then we go to the finished garment measurement. On this particular one, the 16 is a size 41. So let's just act like that this is 41 and a half. When we wear dresses, we don't want them to be so tight on us, especially a woven garment, because it's just not going to fit. Once you put on your bra and eat a hamburger or whatever, it's not going to fit. Nobody wants a dress that's so squeezy on their body that they're uncomfortable. So we're going to say, all right, she's going to need an extra 1 inch in the bust area in order to accommodate this. So now what we're doing is the measurement of 41 and a half. We're using the smaller number and the smaller size so that the neck and the armholes don't have to have any change. Okay? That's what this measurement up here is for. So we don't have to change this. So we don't have to change this. Because when we start changing armholes and neck holes, then we start getting into pattern drafting, and that's a little confusing for some people. All right? So we've determined that she's got a 41 and a half upper bust, but we need an extra inch down here because we need to be able to get her bust in that size 18 neck and arms. Okay. So like I explained before, in a combo pattern, you can always take the size 18 and you can cut the 18 sleeve, you can cut the 18 neck, and then you can take here right underneath the armhole and you can grade out to the 20. That's one thing that you can do. But if you want to do a full bust adjustment, this is another way to attack it. And the full bust adjustment is just a better fit overall, because sometimes if you're not real good with grading out, or if your curves are not just right or whatever, sometimes you will have some fit issues. Okay, so now here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this and we're going to make it so that she needs an extra inch in the bust, we're going to add an extra inch to her finished pattern. All right. So now, step 2. Here's what we do. We got 2 busts. Here's the math. We need an inch, which is 1. So we got 2 busts here, so that means we gotta cut it in half because we're working with half a pattern. When the patterns are drafted, we're always working in quadrants. 1, 2, 3, 4 is on the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Quadrants. In the front, we're working in halves. Note the half of the front. Okay? So now, what you want to do, since she needs a full inch here, what do we add here? Half of 1 is 0.5. So we're only going to add a ½ inch to the front, because what happens is when we lay that paper on top of the fabric, that half and this half equals 1 whole. Okay? So if you're doing a full bust adjustment, and let's say, for instance, the pattern only comes to a size 22, and you need to add 6 inches, then what you need to do, if you need 6 inches all around, then you need to add 3 inches to your half a pattern piece. 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay? And then the way that you're going to do your full bust adjustment is called a Y adjustment. It gives you a wider shoulder, and it opens up the particular pattern right here. It gives you kind of like a Y opening, and it gives you room up here and then also room here as well. Okay, so what I'll do after this video is I will reference the Y adjustment in a link, or either if I find a great YouTube video that I like, I'll reference the Y adjustment underneath this particular video that's going to be in the group. Okay, so now we've determined that she needs a 1 inch bust adjustment, so that means that I have to open my paper up a ½ inch, because 1/2 plus the other half equals 1. 50 cents plus 50 cents is $1. If you got a problem with math, always use money. We all know how to count money. All right, now I'm going to turn the comments on real quick and see if anybody has any questions. Swipe left. Okay. Any questions so far? Everybody know how to count their money. 50 cents plus 50 cents is $1. $3 plus $3 is $6. That's for my big bus girls. So that means that this FBA has to be 3 inches on the half. So when I do 3 inches here, 3 inches here, I'll have my total 6 inches that I need in the front. When you do a full bust adjustment, no, you do not touch the back of the garment. It's a full bust adjustment, not a full back adjustment. So the back stays the same. The side seams on an FBA are not altered. So when you're sewing the front to the back, if this is not altered, then you don't have to do anything to the back piece. That's why you don't do any adjustments to the back. Okay? All adjustments on the full bust adjustment are made to the front where your busts are. Now, if you have boobs on your back, feel free to do FBA, a full back adjustment. All right. Okay. Sorry for the jokes. All right. The pattern drafting part. Okay. So now I got my pattern here on the table. I got a piece of tissue paper. That's what I like to use as a pattern filler because it's roughly the same weight. And then when I get ready to do my patterns, it's not so different between the pattern paper and the actual tissue. I've used craft paper and wrapping paper, and then this one is just a better feel for me, and this is just what I like. You can use whatever it is that you want to use. That's not a problem. All right, now what I do is set my pattern on top of my paper, because I know I'm going to be opening it up and I'm going to need some paper underneath. If you're not ready to do that yet, you don't have to. We can add this later after we draw the lines. And I'm going to keep this under here because I don't want to get Sharpie all over my table. All right, now here's something that I do when I do my FBA adjustments. Because I have a grid here, most of us have a grid, go ahead and line your pattern up with the grid. And I have my pattern right here. My fold line is actually my grain line. So if you have a grain line on your pattern, make sure your grain line is matched to one of the lines on your grid. All right, and I'm just going to I'll set my glasses kind of over here to keep it, I can put this here to keep it from moving. All right, now, FBA is done with 3 lines. We start at the apex, which is the nipple area, okay? And for those of you who have a low bust, as I do a low bust adjustment. You do that first. If you are a higher bust, or maybe a size A cup, because we know patterns are for B cup, and you need to raise the bust, the apex up, do that first. Any lower or upper adjustments that you need to make, do those first. Any lengthening or shortening that you need to do those first. So do your length adjustment first. A higher bust, a lower bust, a shorter torso, a longer torso. Remember we talked about LCD a while back. Length, circumference, and depth. We're going to do the length adjustment first. We need to do the bust low or bust high, move it where it needs to be. And then we start our full bust adjustment, which is actually circumference, because it's giving us more room going around the body. Okay? So now we find our apex mark, and here it is on this particular pattern. And we draw line number 1. Now, this one, or this particular pattern, doesn't have a dart. If there was a dart, we just draw our line right to the dart. And then we go from the arm's eye down about 3 inches. That's usually about where your dart is. About 3 inches down from the arm's eye. Sometimes 2 inches down from the arm's eye, depending on the style of the top. So just on this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go 3 inches down. And I'm going to draw from my apex to the outside. Now we all know that when there's a dart, it's not right here on the apex itself. It's usually about 1 inch away. Okay? That's line number 1. And I just put a mark here to know where my dart would end if I put a dart in here. Actually, we'll leave that there. This is line number 1. And the only reason why this is line number 1 is because there is no dart. According to the book, when they draw their line through the dart, it's usually line number 2. Then we got from the armhole, which is about a third up the armhole, not halfway, about a third up the armhole, then you draw your second line. Now, what I like to do is I like to draw myself a little cheat line, which is the seam line, which is 5/8. My ruler's a little old, so it's kind of hard for me to 5/8 on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5. There's 5 and 5. So I like to kind of draw myself a seam line, because when you do full bust adjustments, you have to imagine that your seam line is here. So instead of imagining it, just go ahead and draw it in. Just takes a couple seconds. And then what happens is when you have your seam line drawn in, then you kind of know where to cut, not to cut, so you don't overcut. So here's the seam line right here that I drew in. Okay. So now from the arm's eye, the seam line, and then straight from the apex down, which is usually parallel to your grain line. Okay, so this is line number 1. This is line number 2. I'm going to go ahead and do it just like the book. So line number 1 is a continuation from the arm's eye to the bust point and down. That's one line. That's a curved line. Okay, smash, smash. That's line number 1. Line number 2 goes from the dart, or if it's a dartless top, about 3 inches down from the arm's eye to the bust point. Okay. And then line number 3 can go anywhere on this side of line number 1. So your extension is anywhere out here. It doesn't have to be so many inches down or whatever. It could be anywhere here. So just as long as it is perpendicular to the line that you just drew, or your grain line, then you just draw across to the edge. This is line number 3. So you only draw 3 lines. 1, and that might confuse people because that's like, that's 2 lines. Now this is 1 continuous line. 1. Line number 2 comes from the bust. 2. Line number 3 is perpendicular to the grain line here. Wham, wham. It can be here. It could be down here. It could be up here, just as long as it's not above the bust point. Okay? So these are your 3 lines. These are the main lines that you need to draw whenever you're doing a full bust adjustment. Okay? Now, here comes the fun part. I'm going to show you all something else I like to do, because I'm human and I make mistakes too. I sew just like you guys, and I learn from trial and error. So here's what I do. I take my tape right here at this line. I put a piece of tape before the seam line. And that kind of keeps my pattern from kind of falling apart. But that's just something that I like to do. I like to put a piece of tape there because I'm going to be cutting in this way to hinge. And I'll show you that, guy. And I just don't want my paper to get all jacked up. All right, now, my 3 lines are my cutting lines. And don't forget, we're doing a 1/2 inch FBA. So we're doing a 1/2 inch seam adjustment. So I just wrote that down so I don't forget, because I forget everything. Now we're cutting. Cutting line number 1. And cut these lines the way that you see them cut. Line number 1 gets cut up to the seam line, and then you stop. That's why we draw that seam line. Because we don't want to cut all the way through this arm's eye. I know some people cut this part off. You're not supposed to do that. So that's why you put that tape there. It's kind of a reminder to, hey, slow down. We're almost at the end. All right, now and then I clip to my seam allowance, because I drew my seam allowance. So I know where to stop cutting. Okay? That's number 1. Now I'm cutting number 2. And I stopped at my bust point, where I drew my bust point, which is 1 inch from this point. You can go 1.5 inches if you want. I usually like mine maybe about 1.5 inches away, because I have a fuller bust. Okay? And then number 3. I'm cutting number 3. Number 3 gets cut all the way across. Duh. I don't know why I was reaching on the other side to cut. Alright. So now, I got my lines 1, 2, 3, and they're all cut. Alright. Now it's time to spread. Now, here's what you can do. I'm going to line that back up. I'm lining my green line back up. And here's my weights out of my makeshift weight. Okay, now, so here's what you do. And this is the part that I think confuses a lot of people. Okay. This is all I do. I'm doing a 1/2 inch adjustment because, remember, my girl needs 1 inch across. 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. All you do is take your finger and slide this part completely down. You're going parallel. These two pieces of paper have to stay parallel. Slide it open until we got a 1/2 inch. That's what I need. Now, see how I just slid that open with my finger? See how all the pieces are opening up on their own? That's all you do. So I'm finding I need a 1/2 inch. So right at the apex, I'm measuring a 1/2 inch. There it is. There's my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to tape this part down. And I need a 1/2 inch. There it is. That's the 1/2 inch right there. And then, this part down here, this little hole right here, that's got to be a 1/2 inch too. Okay, now, this here is trying to move up. It's trying to curl up. So what do I do to stop that from curling up so I can get my 1/2 inch? And I'm glad this is happening because I totally forgot this part. What I do here, now what's happening is this part here is trying to buckle up. And this here is starting to gap. So you go over to the other end and all you do is clip to the seam allowance. So now what happens is I'm clipping on the other side of the seam allowance. This allows this little hinge to fold over on itself because when we have a big bust, we have a narrower armhole. So now I've let go of this little cut here is allowing my pattern to move so it'll work flat. So remember, I got my seam line. I don't cut past the seam line this way. I don't cut past the seam line that way. So in between there's going to be a little bit of paper, which is going to act as my hinge. So now that I have a hinge there, this pattern's going to lay flat. It's going to lay flatter. Actually, I'm going to make it so it goes over the top of the pattern. All right, and that's what I need. My 1/2 inch is here. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and tape this down. And then I'm 1/2 inch everywhere else. Taping it down. 1/2 inch here. I'm taping down. Had to redo that. That wasn't sitting well. 1/2 inches here. Now I'm just taping this down just because this is part of my regular pattern. Here's my new dart. And now what I'm doing right now is I'm just securing this paper underneath. All right. So now I got my 1/2 inch here. My 1/2 inch here. This is going to be my new bust point, because what happens is when you do an FBA, it automatically lowers the bust. If your bust is bigger, it's going to drop a little bit. And then it opens up this room here in the middle where you need this extra room. This space here that opens up gives you more room here in the top for this part of your bust. So when you do a full bust adjustment, you're opening up the pattern here. You're opening it up here. Okay? And now, piece number 3. Remember we talked about line number 3? Well, what's line number 3 for? You ask. You just bring it down to meet the bottom. And it should be a 1/2 inch. Let me do my 1/2 inch here. Oop, there's my 1/2 inch right there. Okay, so now all I did was slide it down so that it continues on the bottom. So I don't have to redraft the bottom. Yeah, let's go here. It's a little bit more than a 1/2 inch here. Okay, I'm going to turn on the comments real quick. Okay, I got the comments on. First comment says, our first question, do you always have to use a dart or can you just add inches? You do not always have to use a dart. If you're a C cup, how far down do you draw your first line? Pat, if you are a C cup, how far do you draw your first line, which is line number 1? Line number 1 goes from the arm's eye to the bust point all the way down to the end of the pattern. If you are a C cup, you need to know where your bust point is. Here's what I suggest you do. Here's the wrap top. There's no bust point on this wrap top. I don't know why, but there's just not. So we're going to use her as a demonstration again to answer Pat's question. Pat, if I'm a C cup and I have this lady here, then I need to measure, because she's a perfect B cup, which is not me. Pat, you got to get out your measuring tape and measure from the shoulder. Almost makes, yeah, it makes almost a princess seam. You got that right. That's exactly what it is. It's just not cut apart. All right, so what you do is measure from your shoulder. Shoulder seam. On my jacket, I got a shoulder seam. So I'm at the shoulder seam on my jacket. And I go right to my bust point. And I'm feeling where my bust point is. And my bust point is at 13 and a quarter. No, 13 and a half. This is not the good bra. Okay, so anyway, when you do your measurements, use the good bra. So 13 and a half. So what I do on her, 13 and a half is way down here. So I'm not a B cup. I'm like a D, double D. So right here is where my bust point would be. I'm just going to put a pin on her. Now I got a little dot there. Then I just put my top on her. Let's turn the pattern piece around. And then I got the top going just a little bit past the shoulder seam, which is going to accommodate for my seam allowance here on the back. This is why they tell you you need a dress dummy or something. And then now she does a little dart or a little whatchamacallit there. And now here's my wrap top. So the thing that you gotta do, ladies, the things that you gotta do is you gotta mark your bust point. There's my bust point right there. Now that I have a bust point drawn on my pattern, which is not a bust point, my bust point, from this little dot, I can draw. Wait a minute. Turn the comments off. From that little dot, now I can draw my 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. 3. After I draw my 3 lines, I cut them. And then I spread them however far I need it. And this one I needed a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch. And the reason why this cut goes all the way down is because you need this to fit here. And then it needs to fit all the way down. Okay? If you have a smaller waist, then at the waistline, you can go ahead and you can taper it to 0. If you have a smaller waistline and a larger bust, you don't have to keep this open all the way. So here's what happens. When you're doing a skirt or you're doing a dress, this 1/2 inch has to be added to the skirt, to your, if you're doing a jumpsuit, doing the pants, you gotta add this extra 1/2 inch. If you have a narrow waist, like I said, all you gotta do is measure. Okay, let's see. My waist goes in from here to here is my natural waist, and that distance is 3 inches. So 3 inches from your apex, you say, okay, this is where my waist starts to get really narrow. So from here on down, you can close that up. And that can taper to 0. And you can use the regular line. And then when you do your skirt, you add your skirt, you don't have to open it up an inch. Okay? So I'm going to turn the comments on. So now, does everybody kind of understand what I'm saying now? When you have your lines, 1, 2, and 3, okay, you make your bust adjustment, come in here. If for any reason your waist is smaller and you're below the bust and you don't need that extra room here below the bust, you can take that, remember that 1/2 inch we did here? You can take it and you can turn it to 0. When you do a V, what that does is that grades to 0 and takes you back to the original shape of the pattern, and then you don't have to adjust your skirt or which is the skirt of the dress, or if you have a jumpsuit, you don't have to adjust the pants or anything. You can just leave those the same, and then when you connect the two all the way around, when you pin them before you sew them, then the distances will match. So don't forget, if you make a FBA and it goes all the way down and you're doing a dress and you FBA only the bodice, when you do that spread, you got to make sure that you add that 1/2 inch to your skirt. Now, for your skirt, you don't have to take this 1/2 inch all the way down if you're making a dress. Only take it to as far as you need it. If you have a little extra stomach room, maybe that little extra 1/2 inch might be good. So you can leave it there, but then stop it like at the hip line. If your hips are okay, you don't have to, if you take that extra 1/2 inch all the way down to the skirt on your dress, then the skirt's going to be too big because you didn't need that extra 1/2 inch. Remember, when we're doing an FBA, it's only for the bodice. It's not for the bottom half of the dress. So if you do need that extra room here in the middle, then what I would say is only add it to the waistband, maybe 1 inch or 2 inches down. You can add this 1/2 inch. And if you do 1 inch or 2 inches down, you're catching the seam allowance, which is the 5/8 of an inch. And then you're giving yourself only like 1 inch of extra room at the top of your skirt when you're attaching this to a dress. But if it's a shirt, then go ahead and just leave that in. The only time you would take it out is if you have a very small waist. Then you can go ahead and angle this in to 0, which means that these 2 points will be back together naturally. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and well, I'm not going to cut this out yet because I'm going to do one more thing. Okay, now, here's my new dart. And I'm going to draw the dart in, just using my ruler. I'm drawing in the dart legs. Okay, naturally start here. So now, here's all you do to get the little point on the edge, is you just go ahead and fold the dart like you're actually folding your fabric, like you're gonna do, like it's gonna sew. You know how you take your dart and you fold it in half? Is that halfway? Yeah, just fold your dart in half. And then all you got to do is take your scissors and you can just cut. And what that does is that gives you your little dart legs that you need. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this over and I'm cutting off the excess paper. That's all I'm doing. Not rocket science. I don't need all of this extra paper on here. So I'm cutting it off. Cut this piece of tape off. So all I'm doing right now is getting rid of the excess paper because I don't need it. Okay, I got my dart folded down, just as if I was sewing. And I am just trimming it according to the side seam. Okay? Because when you're doing your sewing and you fold your dart down, it's nice and straight. And all I did was fold my dart down, and then I just cut even on the side seam. I'll move my hand out the way so you guys can see. Now when I pop it open, it gives me my little triangle legs that I need on the side. So now when I cut my fabric, I'll have my little dart legs there. I'm going to cut some of this excess off. A little bit too much paper here. I hate it when I have a whole lot of paper. Oh, wait a minute. I got one little area where there. I had to fill that back in. I'll take this here. Alright, there it is. The full bust adjustment. Completely done. Now I cut away that extra paper for one side. So now when I cut this pattern, I have my extra inch that I need here. I have this room that I need here to cover the side boob and to cover the top. And then because I have a larger bust, I now have a dart inside my garment. And now, if you notice, this dart is not that large because this particular pattern did not have a dart to begin with. Usually when you have a dart to begin with and you do your FBA, it's going to make the dart larger. That's how come some of you guys might be saying, that's kind of a small dart, because there was no dart in here at all. But we determined that if we need an extra inch, there's going to be a dart on the side of this particular pattern. Okay? 1, 2, 3. That's all you have to remember when you do an FBA. When you do FBAs on one-arm dresses, wrap dresses, bandeaus, what I like to tell you guys is find your bust point. And now, guess what we have? we have a whole half a top to work with again. So now we're going to draw 1, 2, 3. And take 3 all the way over. And this part is going to go down just to meet with the bottom. Remember, number 3, all this does is move down so it can meet the bottom and look like it did originally before the paper was cut. You guys, if you have any questions, tag me on the feed below, and I will be glad to answer any questions you might have. Thanks, Tanya. And that's it. Thanks for joining me. You guys have a good evening, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.